Book 2, the argument. We're beginning with the council in hell of the demons, and this is going to parallel the council in heaven in Book 3. So this is a parody of what will happen in Book 3. The argument. The consultation began. Satan debates whether another battle be to be hazarded for the recovery of heaven. Some advise it, others dissuade. A third proposal is preferred, mentioned before by Satan, to search the truth of that prophecy or tradition in heaven concerning another world and another kind of creature, equal or not much inferior to themselves, about this time to be created. Their doubt who shall be sent on this official search. Satan, their chief, undertakes alone the voyage, is honored and applauded. The council thus ended, the rest betake themselves several ways into several employments as their inclinations lead them, to entertain the time till Satan return. He passes on his journey to hell gates, finds them shut, and who sat there to guard them, by whom at length they are opened, and discover to him the great gulf between hell and heaven, with what difficulty he passes through, directed by chaos, the power of that place, and to the sight of this new world which he sought. High on a throne of royal state, which far outshone the wealth of Ormus and of Ind, or where the gorgeous East, with richest hand, showers on her kings barbaric, pearl and gold, Satan, exalted, sat, by merit raised to that bad eminence, and from despair thus high uplifted beyond hope, aspires beyond thus high, insatiate, to pursue vain war with heaven, and by success untaught his proud imaginations thus displayed. So here, at this moment, Satan begins to speak. Powers and dominions, deities of heaven, for since no deep within her gulf can hold immortal vigor, though oppressed and fallen, I give not heaven for lost. From this descent, celestial virtues rising will appear more glorious and more dread than from no fall, and trust themselves to fear no second fate. So it'll be even more glorious rising from these depths and from these conditions to overtake heaven. Me, though just right and the fixed laws of heaven did first create your leader, next free choice, with what besides in council or in fight hath been achieved of merit. Yet this loss, thus far at least recovered, hath much more established in a safe, unenvied throne, yielded with full consent. So Satan's really clever here. He's outlining all of the reasons why um, he should continue to be their leader. He's suggesting that God or heaven made him, the laws of heaven made him ruler first, which is ironic. And at free choice also. They've chosen to allow him to be their leader. And then finally he says that no one would envy him this throne because he's in hell. The happier state in heaven, which follows dignity, might draw envy from each inferior. But who here will envy whom the highest place exposes foremost to stand against the thunderer's aim, your bulwark, and condemns to greatest share of endless pain? Where there is then no good for which to strive, no strife can grow up there from faction. For none sure will claim in hell precedence, none whose portion is so small of present pain that with ambitious mind will covet more. With this advantage then to union and firm faith and firm accord, more than can be in heaven, we now return to claim our just inheritance of old. In other words, we're better than we were in heaven because we all agree that I'm the rightful owner, or leader. Sure to prosper than prosperity could have assured us. And by what best way, whether of open war or covert guile, we now debate. Who can advise may speak. So he opens the floor for debate. Do we retake heaven? Do we use deception? What do we do? He ceased, and next him Moloch, who is the god of wrath or anger. He ceased, and next him Moloch, sceptered king, stood up, the strongest, and the fiercest spirit that fought in heaven, now fiercer by despair. His trust was with the eternal to be deemed equal in strength, and rather than to be less, cared not to be at all. With that care lost went all his fear. In other words, now that he realizes that he's lost, he becomes reckless. God or hell or worse, he recked not, and these words thereafter spake. My sentence is for open war. Of wiles more unexpert I boast not. Them let them let those contrive who need or when they need, not now. For while they sit contriving, shall the rest, millions that stand in arms and longing wait the signal to ascend, sit lingering here, heaven's fugitives, and for their dwelling place accept this dark, opprobrious den of shame, the prison of his tyranny who reigns by our delay? No! Let us rather choose, armed with hell flames and fury, all at once o'er heaven's highest towers to force resistless way, turning our tortures into horrid arms against the torturer. When to meet the noise of his almighty engine he shall hear infernal thunder, and for lightning see black fire, and horror shot with equal rage among his angels, and his throne itself mixed with Tartarian sulphur and strange fire, his own invented torments. But perhaps the way seems difficult and steep to scale with upright wing against a higher foe. Let such bethink then, if the sleepy drench of that forgetful lake benumb not still, that in our proper motion we ascend up to our native seat. Descent and fall to us is adverse. Who but felt of late when the fierce foe hung on our broken rear insulting, and pursued us through the deep, with what compulsion and laborious flight we sunk thus low? The ascent is easy then. The event is feared? Should we again provoke our stronger some worse way his wrath might find to our destruction? If there be in hell fear to be worse destroyed, what can be worse than to dwell here driven out from bliss, condemned in this abhorred deep to utter woe, where pain of undistinguishable fire may exercise us without hope of end, the vassals of his anger, when the scourge inexorably and the torturing hour calls us to penance? More destroyed than thus, we should be quite abolished and expire. What fear we then? What doubt we to incense his utmost ire, which, to the height enraged, will either quite consume us and reduce to nothing this essential, happier far than miserable, to have eternal being? Or, if our substance be indeed divine, and cannot cease to be, we are, at worst, on this side nothing, and by proof we feel our power sufficient to disturb his heaven, and with perpetual inroads to alarm, though inaccessible, his fatal throne, which, if not victory, is yet revenge. He ended, frowning, and his look denounced desperate revenge and battle dangerous to less than gods. On the other side rose up Belial, in act more graceful and humane. So Belial is beautiful, but remember, beauty is deceptive. A fairer person lost not heaven. He seemed for dignity composed and high exploit, but all was false and hollow, though his tongue dropped manna, and could make the worst appear better reason to perplex, and dashed maturest counsels. For his thoughts were low, to vice industrious, but to nobler deeds timorous and slothful. I want you to notice how often you hear these 7 deadly sins addressed. Yet he pleased the ear, and with persuasive accent thus began. That I should be much for open war, O peers, as not behind in hate, if what was urged, main reason to persuade immediate war, did not dissuade me most, and seem to cost ominous conjecture on the whole success, when he who most excels in fact of arms in what he counsels and in what excels mistrustful, grounds his courage on despair, and utter dissolution of the scope of all his aim after some dire revenge. The first of revenge. The towers of heaven are filled with armed watch that render all access impregnable. Oft on the bordering deep encamp their legions, or with obscure wings scout far and wide into the realm of night, scorning surprise. Or could we break our way by force, and at our heels all hell should rise with blackest insurrection, to confound heaven's purest light, yet our great enemy, all incorruptible, would, on his throne, sit unpolluted, and the ethereal mould, incapable of stain, would soon expel her mischief, and purge off the base of fire victorious. Thus repulsed, our final hope is flat despair. We must exasperate the almighty victor to spend all his rage, and that must end us. That must be our cure, to be no more. Sad cure. For who would lose, though full of pain, this intellectual being, those thoughts that wander through eternity, to perish rather, swallowed up and lost in the wide womb of uncreated night, devoid of sense and motion? And who knows? Let this be good, whether our angry foe can give it, or will ever. How he can is doubtful, that he never will is sure. Will he, so wise, let loose at once his ire, belike through impotence or unaware, to give his enemies their wish, and end them in anger, whom his anger saves to punish endless? Wherefore cease we then, say they who counsel war. We are decreed, reserved, and destined to eternal woe, whatever doing. What can we suffer more? What can we suffer worse? Is this then worse, thus sitting, thus consulting, thus in arms? What, when we fled amain pursued, and struck with heaven's afflicting thunder, and besought the deep to shelter us? This hell then seemed a refuge from those wounds, or when we lay chained on the burning lake, that sure was worse. What if the breath that kindled those grim fires, awakened, should blow them into sevenfold rage, and plunge us into the flames? Or from above, should intermitted vengeance arm again his red right hand to plague us? What if all her stores were opened, and this firmament of hell should spout her cataracts of fire, impendent horrors, threatening hideous fall, one day upon our heads, while we, perhaps designing or extorting glorious war, caught in a fiery tempest, shall be hurled each on his rock transfixed, the sport and prey of racking whirlwinds, forever sunk under yon boiling ocean, wrapped in chains, there to converse with everlasting groans, unrespited, unpitied, unreprieved, ages of hopeless end. This would be worse. War, therefore, open or concealed alike, my voice dissuades. For what can force or guile with him? Or who deceive his mind, whose eye views all things at one view? He from heaven's height all these our motion vain sees, and derides, not more almighty to resist our might than wise to frustrate all our plots and wiles. Shall we then live thus vile, the race of heaven thus trampled, thus expelled, to suffer here chains and these torments? Better these than worse, by my advice, since fate, inevitable, subdues us, and omnipotent decree the victor's will. To suffer as to do, our strength is equal, nor the law unjust that so ordains. This was at first resolved, if we were wise, against so great a foe, contending and so doubtful what might fall. I laugh when those who at the spear are bold and venturous, If that fail them, they shrink and fear what yet they know must follow, to endure exile or ignominy or bonds of pain, the sentence of their conqueror. This is now our doom, which, if we can sustain and bear, our supreme foe in time may much remit his anger, and perhaps thus far removed, not minding us offending, satisfied with what is punished, whence these raging fires will slacken if his breath stir not their flames. Our purer essence then will overcome their noxious vapour, and inured not feel, or change at length into the place conformed in temper and in nature will receive familiar that fierce heat, and void of pain this horror will grow mild, this darkness light. Besides, what hope the never-ending flight of future days may bring? What chance, what change worth waiting since our present lot appears for happy, though but ill, for ill, not worse, if we procure not to ourselves more woe? Thus Belial, with words clothed in reason's garb, counselled ignoble ease and peaceful sloth. Not peace, and after him thus Mammon spoke. Here ends the first installment of Book 2.